Oh boy, this was an episode alright. Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 Episode 3 looked insane. It was the best looking episode so far. You know what, let's jump right into the breakdown, make sure to subscribe. This episode was directed and storyboarded by Naoki Miyajima. It was his first time doing either, and what a debut. This episode was incredibly well directed and incredibly well animated. One of the best things about this episode from a directorial point of view was the tone shifts. It had one at the start with the scene going from tense to goofy. It had another one when Toji appeared and yet another one near the end. This was made possible by the direction and it worked perfectly. The fake ED sequence near the end almost managed to fool me. And I've read the manga, I knew what was about to happen. Anyway, the first few minutes of this episode consisted of some strong drawings and a bunch of creative camera angles. Props to the storyboard work. The beams here got the sense of volume across. It looked like Rico was behind the beam and there was some distance between the two elements, even though the whole thing is flat because it's a 2D drawing. Like I said before, most of this season is interesting to look at. I loved how goofy this scene was. The sun and its beams are heavily stylized, which adds to the comedic nature of this sequence. The entire beach scene looked great. There wasn't anything particularly complex about it, but it was fun to look at. There was some life to it. I won't use the word soul because of course I won't. If I ever use the word soul in one of these videos, feel free to unsubscribe and report me to the authorities. Also, the compositing had that summer feel to it, with the increased vibrance and some subtle blurring. I really like these kagenashi or shadowless shots in particular. They are really pleasing to look at. And speaking of pleasing to look at, this entire segment was captivating. The lighting and the shadow work on these leaves looked beautiful. I think it was an effect added by the compositing department, but I don't know for sure. This entire friendship shenanigans section looked gorgeous, and the piano score that played during the scene complemented it perfectly. The aquarium scene was animated by Benjamin Foray. He's a regular name on this show and it's very easy to identify his work in an episode. Generally speaking, it's the most beautiful looking scene. Also, all of the aquatic creatures here are hand-drawn, which is really impressive. These cuts are a lot more complex than you think. These are a lot of individual creatures and each one of them had to be hand animated and made to move with respect to the other creatures around it. Gojo getting stabbed was perfectly abrupt. It felt like we had let our guard down alongside Gojo. The compositing and the all-around aesthetic completely changes during this flashback. Reminds me of Mushoku Tensei. Love this one shot, it's so good looking, especially the eyes. And that brings us to the action. And before we talk about it, there's one thing I need to mention. The dimming and the ghosting. Nearly every cut of action had some amount of dimming or ghosting thrown on top of it. Now generally I don't think too much of that stuff, but it is unfortunate. Apparently this show changed its TV time slot, which is the reason why the amount of dimming has increased. Again, it is unfortunate. I'll try not to mention this again. Anyway, let's talk about the fight, which looked phenomenal from start to finish. It starts off with some well executed camera tracking. Also, the smears look great. This part of the fight was animated by Hayato Kurosaki. His effects animation here looks amazing, although it would be nice if I could actually see most of it. The previous frame bleeding into the next one doesn't help. Damn you, Japanese television laws. Very strong drawing here. It's quite detailed despite the minimal line work on the face. Gojo's power is largely conveyed through digital effects. The delicate blue overlay looks nice. It's not overpowering. They added a lot of wind effects and kinetic lines around Toji's movement, which gave it a messy look and helped get the speed and the weight across. Also, of course, I meant messy in a good way. Kosuke Kato animated this amazing sequence. His work was one of the highlights of this episode. It starts off with some unique background animation. It looks like the trees are actively forming out of thin air as Toji moves past them. Also, Toji's body is heavily distorted with incredibly strong smears. His body stretches and gets compressed to an unnatural degree. Of course, that's the whole point. Toji's hand is literally two different objects here. As a still frame, this makes no sense, but it flows perfectly when it's in motion, which is what animation is all about. Pausing in between and critiquing a frame is immensely stupid. Also, the white kinetic lines are fully opaque, which is an interesting look. Kosuke Kato handles the speed incredibly well. Also, his snappy timing adds a sense of weight to the scene. The background animation here is amazing. I've already talked about these cuts in my trailer breakdowns. The thick, almost Koki Fujimoto-like smears add to that messy look I was talking about, and the timing is flawless. The super background movement here is really well executed. It's a single warped illustration. Also love the storyboards. Toji literally leaves the frame at one point, and the camera moving past Gojo's fingers looked amazing. Creative stuff. The next couple of cuts move incredibly fast, but you can catch that cocky smile on Toji's face. This bit of background animation is mind-blowing. Not only is the background hand animated, it has an angular warped perspective. This entire scene was animated by Kosuke Kato, one of the quote main animators, and it had that raw sense of impact thanks to the timing amongst other things. Unreal. Moving on, love the way speed is shown here. Toji's body pretty much doesn't show up. We get a few frames with Toji in quotation marks, followed by some wind effects. Also, nice bit of rotation here. Next up, we have Keiichiro Watanabe's sequence, and holy fucking shit did it look insane. We start off with that classic Keiichiro Watanabe effects animation, most of which is animated on ones, aka has a frame rate of 24. The wind, the multiple shades of blue, the sheer volume of effects animation here is insane. Of course, Gojo's erratic and incredibly fluid movement is equally as impressive. Everything in this scene moves and it keeps moving. That's Keiichiro Watanabe for you. The amount of hand-drawn debris is ridiculous as well. Like seriously, the volume of effects and debris is utterly insane. Each of these elements had to be hand animated. Watanabe is a madman. Also, the background animation is immaculate. I genuinely cannot tell which cut here used a 3D background. Apparently one or a few of them did. If I had to guess, I'd say some of the super background is 3D, but I don't know for sure. Also, I think the blue accent wasn't too overpowering. Of course, it covered the entire screen, but the attack is literally named blue, so come on. We get some amazing effects near the end. It was an amazing sequence. Keiichiro Watanabe is credited as a main animator. He'll work on more stuff for this show. How does he do it? Of course, we aren't done. Next up, we have Yuto's sequence. His portion was very timing dependent and snappy, similar to Kosuke Kato's work. Toji attacking Gojo felt visceral and the movement was perfectly timed. Each slash and stab felt heavy. This was surprisingly brutal. This whole fight was incredibly well animated and it featured two polar opposite styles of animation. Kosuke Kato and Keiichiro Watanabe's sequence couldn't be further apart in terms of style, but it worked. Neither of the two styles felt out of place in my opinion. Incredible stuff. Of course, the episode isn't over. We get a lot of amazing character acting animation because of course we do. The simplified designs come in handy during scenes like these. The facial expressions, the subtle movements, this entire scene looked amazing. And that brings us to the gunshot, which was so well executed. See what I did there? Like I said, I have read the manga, I knew how this scene plays out, but it still got me. The fake ending song, the triumphant and hopeful presentation, which was shattered in a second. Such an amazing scene. Such an amazing episode. I really enjoyed it. Everything about this episode felt high profile. The animation and the all-around presentation, it looked perfect. I don't know if the team can maintain this quality throughout the episodes, but hey, at least the first 5 episodes are pretty much guaranteed to look amazing. According to some leaks, the next episode will look even more insane, and it may or may not be directed by Arifumi Imai. The staff list for this show is insane. That's about it. Did you like this video? Check out this other bit of content on screen. Like and subscribe, and until next time.